Bienvenue à toutes et à tous.
Welcome,
C'est
everybody.
avec une profonde joie que nous vous
And it's with great joy that we are hosting this webinar that marks the community of practice on disability inclusive education sector planning, COP-DIESP, within the framework of planning for inclusive education, which is a regional program in West Africa funded by the Italian Corporation and implemented by IIEP Africa. We are honored to welcome Mr. Martin Benavides, who is the director of IIP UNESCO, and Giovanni Grandi, who is the director of the Dakar office for development, AICS. He is going to be here for the inauguration of the webinar and will officially launch our COP DIESP. I'm also honored to give the floor to our director, Martin Benavides. Thank you so much, Sylvia, director of the AICS, director of the Italian Office for Cooperation, dear colleagues, dear partners, ladies and gentlemen. It's with great pleasure that we welcome you to this global webinar uh, entitled Developing Disability Inclusive EMIS Lessons from Armenia, Gambia, and South Africa. This webinar shall mark the official launch of the community of practice on education sector planning for the inclusion of persons with disabilities, the COP-DIESP project. The COP-DIESP is an initiative that is part of the regional program Planning for Inclusive Education funded by the Italian Agency for Development Cooperation and implemented by IIEP UNESCO in Africa. This program aims to strengthen the capacities of 8 West African countries in inclusive education planning so that disability inclusion is at the heart of education planning process. By placing inclusion at the very heart of planning, it contributes to building fairer, more resilient, and truly transformative education systems. UNESCO has always had a mission to promote quality, inclusive, and equitable education for all. But we know that this ambition cannot be achieved without paying special attention to children and youth with disabilities who are very often left on the outskirts of education systems. The community we are launching today, COP-DS, available in 3 languages, French language and Portuguese, is much more than a virtual space. It is, in fact, one of the concrete instruments for implementing the regional program and is intended to be a place for meeting, dialogue, and collaboration between decision makers, practitioners, researchers, organizations of persons with disabilities, and development partners. Together, we will share experiences, exchange ideas, leverage on knowledge and practices, and above all, build concrete solutions to make our education systems truly inclusive. The COP-DS goes beyond the 8 countries targeted by the program to become a global movement contributing to strengthen inclusive education planning, not only in Africa, but also in other parts of the world. The first webinar of this community is dedicated to the integration of disability in education management information systems, because without reliable data, there can be no informed policies or appropriate strategies. Inclusion then remains a mere ideal. I would like to remind you that IAP UNESCO already hosts other communities of practice in the field of education planning, some focused on the specific themes such as gender equality, others on specific regions such as Latin America. Together, they form a true global hub of knowledge and experience where each COP contributes to improving the quality of educational planning and accelerating progress towards inclusive and equitable education. The COP-DS enriches this network, and as the first global COP in Portuguese, it opens up new opportunities for international collaboration, particularly South-South collaboration, as envisaged in the regional program Planning for Inclusive Education. I would like to warmly thank our partners, in particular the AICS, for their valuable support, as well as the experts and panelists who will be sharing their experiences today. I would also like to thank each and every one of you for your commitment, your participation, which is actually key to the success of this community. Inclusive education is not an option, it is a fundamental right. It is also an essential condition for building fairer, more resilient, and more prosperous societies. By launching this community of practice, we are jointly affirming that the inclusion of persons with disabilities in education is a global priority. I wish the COP-DS and this first Global COP webinar every success. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Director. I would like to ask Giovanni Grandi to take the floor. Thank you so much, respected Director of IIP UNESCO, ladies and gentlemen, dear partners, dear panelists, and dear colleagues. It's an immense pleasure for me to take the floor today on behalf of the Italian Cooperation Agency on the launch of the Community of Practice on disability inclusive education sector planning. And this inaugural webinar uh, marks the starting point of our joint work. This event is part of the regional program in West Africa, Planning for Inclusive Education, funded by the Italian Corporation that supports 8 West African countries in strengthening their capacities in disability inclusive planning in order to better address the needs of the disabled youth. In Italy, inclusive education is a strategic priority. Mm, with in several contexts, persons with disabilities are living in the margins of education systems and are not factored into the public policies and decision-making processes. We are convinced that inclusion is a fundamental right and is a lever to attain sustainable development objectives and concretize the perspective. The theme of today's webinar on inclusion is really important. EMIS can produce reliable data and disaggregated data on disability, and this is really important to make certain choices in planning, orient public policies, and make progress. You can't have inclusive planning without having inclusive data. And it's basic to go beyond time to time actions that we wanted a partnership with IAP UNESCO and create this community of practice dedicated to these stakes. This community basically targets representatives of governments, civil society organizations, planners, including disability organizations include and technical partners. Our uh, goal is to create a space to exchange ideas and encourage peer learning, experience sharing, and co-building solutions that are adapted to regional and national realities. are important. This webinar is really structuring. It's a forum for dialogue. It's also a forum for collaboration and has launched a momentum that is founded on data and facts. We have to reinstate our will to contribute to inclusive education policies based on data. Partnership and capacity building are also extremely important. The innovative character uh, is quite stark. You have the commitment of each and every one of you, and hence this community will be a concrete and permanent space where you will find resources that can be used by national teams. Uh, Structuring exchanges and solutions around the education sector problems and contribution of experts will be found in this space, and it's thus a work tool. And I'm really glad um, to see the diversity of stakeholders here. They come from different countries and institutions and different language backgrounds. This diversity is a major asset for our exchange. B- Enriching perspectives and enhancing the impact of our work is extremely important. I would like to warmly thank to IIEP, UNESCO, whose expertise and commitment was necessary to transform all this into a reality. Uh, uh, Over the past years, with regard to the work done on inclusion, I officially declared this community of practice open on disability inclusive education sector planning. And I would like to wish you an excellent webinar and a very fruitful collaboration for the future. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Thank you, Mr. Director, for officially launching the community of practice COP DIESP. We would like to explain how IIEP UNESCO in Africa, with the support of AICS, initiated this platform of exchange and sharing. So within the framework of a regional program funded by the Italian corporation, the director of IEP reminded the inclusion of disability in education sector planning is a priority if you really want to promote inclusive education in an effective way. And this is really this can not be done after the planning process. It should be integrated right from the conception of the education sector plan. We really must focus on disability right from the start. Thanks to this, IIEP in Africa has created a community of practice to favor exchange of knowledge and collaboration around the inclusion of disability in the education sector planning. And the director has also reminded our conviction and our joint efforts to strengthen the education systems and have a truly inclusive education systems. It is really important to remind you of the link between the regional program, which is funded by the AICS Planning for Inclusive Education, that targets 8 countries in West Africa that support these countries so that they can include disability in the education sector planning. Our vision is to build education systems that are truly inclusive and fair for disabled youth and children, not just in West Africa, but also over and beyond, as was already said. This community of practice aims to go beyond the scope of a program planning for inclusive education. And I think the presence of more than 180 people is a testimony of the interest of the international community and all stakeholders to promote a truly inclusive education through experience sharing and knowledge sharing. So it's based, this is the objective of our COP-DS. It's about facilitating peer learning between planners, between stakeholders. We really need to deepen our knowledge and promote collaboration, especially between the southern countries. So promote South-South collaboration. It is about promoting South-South collaboration, and I can ensure you that this South-South collaboration has already started happening ever since the launch of the community of practice. We have a lot of exchange and experience sharing amongst the countries of the global South. Now, we really would like to highlight the relationship between the community of practice and the choice of focusing on and more inclusive EMIS. The director stressed upon the need to integrate disability in MS. We need to have solid and reliable data. This is extremely important for inclusive education. So if we support planning processes to promote inclusive education, we really need to support the development of a truly inclusive EMIS. And this is why we are all here to talk about this theme, which is crucial uh, within the framework of promoting educational inclusive education. Education systems need tools to factor in all learners, including persons with disabilities. And in several contexts, as you already know, the data on disability is either not available or incomplete or difficult to compare, which is extremely challenging in terms of analysis and planning. Because if MS does not provide us with the necessary data, we really cannot plan, budget in an adequate way to ensure that education is truly inclusive. And this is why we are here today to talk about this theme and also give us a kind of a thread to our community on the importance of having data on disabilities. So we're going to talk about MS, and we will have other global webinars that will look deeper into this on this theme. We're really glad to have a panel of experts who are going to share their experience. We've said that the community of practice is basically there to share experiences and do peer learning. There are countries that are more advanced. There are best practices that can be applied to other contexts with some fine tuning. So we're here to basically promote this exchange. This webinar, we would really like this webinar to be participative. We're going to solicit your ideas through the Mentimeter, and there are going to be two Mentimeter surveys, and we really are counting on your active participation. The Estelle Camera will be facilitating us. She's our community manager, and we're really honored to have an expert of international renown, Daniel Mont, who is an expert on inclusion. He's going to moderate a panel discussion that's going to be very interesting, and I'm sure that you will greatly appreciate it. Once again, thank you for being here and thank you for participating in this webinar. I'm going to now give the floor to Daniel Mont.
Hello, and thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here to talk with so many of you on this very important topic. I'm just going to share my screen. And I think I'm good to go. So we're going to start to give an overview of what we mean by what are some of the key issues in building an EMIS that supports inclusive education. So I think it's important before we get into the whole discussion and all the learning from all our participants to sort of be on the same page as to what some of those key fundamental aspects are. As was just mentioned, EMISs are a vital source of information for planning, designing, and delivering education services. So therefore, to be really useful, they need to be constructed properly to give us the right information, to give it to us in a timely way, and to give it to us with good quality that we can rely on. Fortunately, many countries are more interested in improving their EMISs, and there's more and more activity going around in the region and in the world. And so it's an exciting time to be thinking about all this. And the community of practice that we're launching today is hoping to facilitate these efforts, and so we can share all our experiences and learn from each other. Before we talk about inclusive EMIS, we need to talk about what we mean by disability and disability inclusive education. According to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the CRPD, persons with disabilities include those who have various types of impairments, which in interaction with various barriers in the environment can limit their effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. And this is very important because it brings in both the personal characteristics of the person, maybe the difficulties they have, the impairments they have, but very much needs to be looked at through the context of the environmental barriers that exist, that are the ones that are, which is what is creating exclusion. And disability inclusive education then is to transform the education system to remove those barriers, provide reasonable accommodations, and allow all learners, no matter what difficulties they may have in various areas of functioning, to be able to get that quality education that they deserve. So for sector planning, we need data on both children and the environment. So for children, we want to know about their functional limitations. What activities do they have difficulty doing? And we have the Child Functioning Module teacher version developed by UNICEF and the Washington Group on Disability Statistics, which is a good model for that. But we also need to collect data on their support needs, right? What are the supports that children with these functional limitations need to be successful? And we also need to collect data on the environment. And by environment, we mean the physical environment, like ramps and toilets and things like that. The informational environment, so people who have difficulty hearing or seeing or cognitive abilities to be able to get the information they need. Materials and human resources. What are the skills and people resources that are there to help our learners learn? So when we have that disability inclusive EMIS, what can it give us? Well, first, it can tell us how many students have disabilities. It can tell us the types and degree of disability, because disability is a very heterogeneous thing, right? The people face very different types of barriers. It's not a homogeneous group. So what are their particular support needs? How does this vary by age or by gender? And importantly, how do their learning outcomes differ from those without disabilities? What's the impact of disability on these learners' lives? And how is this all related to the school environment? How can we change that school environment, whether it's human resources, physical infrastructure, materials, communication? As we change those things, how does that impact the ability for everyone to get that education? So what are the issues that affect EMIS reliability? Well, first, the quality of the questions. Are we asking the right questions? Are we not taking a medical approach, for example, to identifying children with disabilities, but instead looking at what are the difficulties they have doing various activities? And also appropriate aspects of the environment. Are we collecting that properly? We have to worry about privacy concerns, especially with student level data. Student level data is much more valuable than, say, classroom level data, but that opens up privacy concerns that we have to take account of, especially if we want to make the system interoperable with other government data systems, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. If we link the EMIS data to the social welfare data, to the health data, that can be extremely powerful, but it opens up those privacy concerns. Another thing that affects reliability is who's entering the data. Is it a teacher who has firsthand knowledge of the child, or is it an administrator? What's the training and experience of the person filling it out? And very importantly, what is the motivation? We're asking these teachers, for example, to fill out all this information. If the data is being used, if they see it as being helpful to advancing their goals, you're going to get much higher quality data, much more buy-in, and actually giving you the data. But if it's not, if it's seen as just a busy work, you're not going to get that same sort of compliance or the same quality of data. There are, of course, challenges in implementing an EMIS. The first is the fear of stigma. Parents especially don't like when their children are labeled as having a disability. Labeling can be misused, right? We can say, oh, we're going to identify a child with a disability and then send them to a segregated system. That's a terrible outcome, right? So we have to be careful that we're using the data in support of inclusion. And we have to realize that identifying children's difficulties doesn't necessarily mean we have to quote unquote label a child as having a disability. Portugal is a country with an example where they collect all this information on the individual children and their needs, but they don't label the child as having a disability. There's no need to do that in delivering that education. Another challenge is limited technical capacity. If we're talking about an electronic system, we need the computers, we need the coding, we need to build that IT system, and that can be a challenge. The increased response burden, we're asking, say, teachers to spend a lot more time. Like I said, that's a challenge. It's less of a challenge if the teachers see it as helping them achieve their goals. And of course, overwhelmingly, it's agreement on the social model of disability, right? If we're going to have an inclusive EMIS, we have to have buy-in that we want an inclusive education system that's built on the social model of disability that's at the heart of the CRPD. So now we're going to take a slight chance here to interact with you so that you can tell us what are the challenges, what are the key challenges that you think you face in developing an inclusive EMIS. You can scan the QR code, or you could go to a link in the chat. It will take you to a Menti screen where you can vote. You can enter what you think are the key challenges that you're facing. And I think I'm going to turn the screen over to Esther now, who's going to be able to show us the results as they're coming in. Uh-oh. I don't see the Menti screen. Esther, is it up?
Yes, the Menti screen is
Maybe
up. Do
I
you see
need to
it?
go to her too.
Let me reshare it. There we go. Do you see the Menti screen?
Oh, here it comes. Okay, great. I'll give it a few more minutes for people to vote in. It seems like right now that the overwhelming leader is technical capacity. It's being able to set up those electronic systems to be able to follow, to be able to monitor children at an individual level, their individual needs, be able to evaluate the outcomes of individual children. It requires that sort of technical capacity. And I think that I'll give this a few more. We have 59 people who are looking, and we have 39 votes. So still some people voting. Interestingly, the buy-in to social model of disability is number 2. I find that very interesting. I actually, to tell you the truth, was not expecting that to be the second one. So we still have work to do in trying to change people's concept of what disability is, that it is this interaction between the difficulties that say a child might have doing different activities and the environment that they're in, that we have to think of disability as that interaction in order to be able to build systems that remove those barriers. Okay. I think I think the results are very clear that we have number one is technical capacity and number two is buying to social media. So I'm gonna, because I know we are short on time, I'm gonna go back to my slide here for the last thing. So moving forward, what should we do? The first thing we need to do is review our current system. What is the data you're collecting? What are your implementation procedures? Do you have an electronic system? Do you have are you only collecting data the first week of school and you're not following up what happens, a few months later, et cetera? What data are you collecting? How are you collecting it? How are you implementing it? And then the second, of course, would be then to modify the forms. The first is to modify those forms. What are the actual questions that you want to use to identify children with disabilities and to describe the environment that they're operating in? Then once you have that, we can develop the plan for the electronic, hopefully student level data collection, the system design, and of course, budgeting for resources. There's going to be, especially at the beginning, transition costs in creating such a system, and we always come back to financial resources. And I think concurrent with developing that plan, we need to do awareness raising and respondent training. So awareness raising so that we get that buy-in to the social model of disability and the teachers are prepared to give us the data we need. And then, of course, before we fully institute things, we have to do system testing to make sure that we've got things set up right, that we have the reliability and quality so that we can then scale up and have truly inclusive data for us to develop our plans and monitor and evaluate their impact. So thank you very much for your attention and look forward to getting all the input from all of our members of our community of practice as we move forward. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup à Daniel Mont pour cette introduction.
Thank you very much, Daniel Mont, for this introduction to the discussion panel, which will be a very interesting one. We already have some inputs from the participants. We have more than 200 participants to this global webinar. So Daniel Mont, it's up to you to continue and to just manage this panel with guests from different continents, different countries, and with different experiences. Over to you.
Okay, great. Well, we are delighted to have with us here today 3 amazing panelists to discuss how to develop disability inclusive EMISs. Look forward to learning from them. Anna Mendy, who's the Director of Early Childhood and Inclusive Education Directorate at the Gambian Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education. We also have with us Marie Scheumann, an inclusive education technical expert and member of the ministerial task team reviewing inclusive education policy for South Africa, although not representing the task team in this meeting. Hazmik Hugassian, an expert in social protection and inclusive education, and a member of the Ministerial Working Group Disability Reform in Armenia. So welcome, and thank you for agreeing to be on this panel today. We're very interested in improving data that can help us build more disability inclusive education systems. And we asked you here today because you're doing very interesting things that I think people can learn a lot from. We don't have a lot of time, so let's get right to it. My first question to all of you is, what was the motivating factor that drove you to undertake your recent efforts? So Marie, why don't you start?
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for the lovely introduction. For us in South Africa, the motivation has been very clear. Despite more than 20 years of policy implementation, South Africa still has to improve visibility for all children with disabilities. Perhaps I should mention there are still many who are out of school. Unfortunately, some children on waiting lists or in inappropriate placements. And without reliable, comparable data, the system has been unable to effectively implement inclusive education, plan, support, track exclusion, or meet its constitutional and CRPD obligations. So improving data is therefore not just a technical exercise, it is a rights and an accountability issue.
Director Anna, I assume there's a similar rationale in the Gambia, but what has been your major efforts?
Thank you, Daniel. Yes, it has been a similar rationale in the Gambia.
Anna, you may be on mute because I can't hear you.
Our main motivation, can you hear me now?
Anna, can you?
Yeah, yes, Director Anna, we
Yes.
can hear you properly.
Yes.
Please go on.
Yes, our main motivation.
Maybe she's having a connection problem.
Our main motivation has been to make education and
While we're waiting for Anna, maybe you can just go on and tell us a little bit more
Dan,
about what South Africa has been up to.
Dan,
We can hear Anna.
You can hear?
We can hear Director Anna, yes. So we can
Yes, we can hear.
respond the question.
Oh.
And we will fix your issue. No worries. Director Anna, over to you.
Yeah. Yes, in the Gambia, our main motivation has been to make education equity visible and actionable. So we can move from aggregate reporting to evidence-based planning and resource allocation that better supports inclusive education, especially for learners and schools that are underserved. This has led to 3 major actions. First, strengthening our EMIS reform work to better capture equity and inclusion variables, to better identify children with disabilities, and monitoring infrastructure accessibility, data items, and tracking of teachers supporting children with special needs. Secondly, advancing the digital transformation agenda for education data to improve access to data for planning and decision making. And the third point was promoting a more participatory approach to data and accountability by linking EMIS card, which help bring communities EMIS improvements to tools like the school report card, community scorecard, which helps to bring community perspectives and school level readiness realities into discussions about inclusion and service delivery.
Thanks. I'm sorry for my confusion. Marie, what has South Africa been up to?
Well, in South Africa, the most important shift, which is now currently underway, is to move from deficit-based disability labels based on diagnosis. Can I just mention diagnosis is very difficult in the absence of trained professionals to diagnose children, especially in remote areas. But we'd like to move from these deficit-based disability labels to functional, support-orientated data that gives a profile of both learners' difficulties as well as their abilities and strengths. A recent review of the national policy on inclusive education that was commissioned by the Minister of Basic Education has focused on a number of issues. Number one, reframing disability data in EMIS away from medical categories towards functional difficulties aligned to the Washington Group questions or the UNICEF child functioning model more particularly. Then strengthening the learner profile so that functional information, early screening, barriers experienced, support needs, and reasonable accommodation are captured once, and then travel with the learner through the system. That comes back to your reference to linking between sectors as well. And then lastly, linking the existing advanced systems that we have in South Africa, such as our digital SA SAMS and the Learner Unique Record Information and Tracking System called LURITS, to link that more deliberately so that data collected by schools actually informs district planning, support provisioning, and funding decisions.
And Hasmi, this is something that Armenia has been particularly active in, this linking of data systems. Can you tell us about that?
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for this opportunity to share Armenian experience. First of all, I would like to start that saying that Armenia has successfully transitioned from diagnosis-based medical approach to functional assessment. So we don't use no longer this medical diagnosis for describing people with disabilities and children with disabilities. And this is the same in our education system. And in EMIS, we use the same, almost the same description of special educational needs and children with disabilities, and also describe the environmental barriers that children are facing in the education system. Our motivation, just to say, was also twofold. And first is that the country has its obligation in front of UNCRPD. And the second one, which is most important for us, is to bring children with disabilities in education system visible and to start to understand how many children with disabilities are studying in schools, and also link the education programs to the needs of these children. And I want to say that this, we have parallel reforms in social protection sector, which I say that we shifted the disability assessment to functional assessment, and in education sector, that the special educational needs also, we include here children with disabilities, learning difficulties, and also children with exceptional abilities. They all are considered as children with special educational needs. They are assessed with functional assessment approach, and their data are entered into EMIS system. For EMIS system, our National Center for Education Technologies created new module, which includes this information and allows us to get very good data on children with special educational needs. First, this system allows us to register students who pass an assessment using standardized categories aligned with international framework. Data, the system allows us to get disaggregated data by age, by sex, by region, by school. We can, from the system, collect this all information by type of special educational needs and level of support intensity that these children are needed. So this is really very important. It also allows us to calculate in enrollment and participation rate, and to understand how many children with disabilities in which region we have more or less, and then monitor the trends over the time, and then generate evidence for policy decision, because EMIS is the foundation for calculating the funding for schools, and also inclusive education is the part of school funding, and this EMIS is helping to get this important data for creating the budget for schools. The data show that, so we started this module from 2019. From 2022, we expanded the module, and now we have data also on preschool children with special educational needs. And as of today, we have more than 11,000 children. Our country is small, the numbers are small, and 11,000 children with special educational needs in education is big number. So with this support, now it's became more easier for the government to do the fund of education, and especially the needs of special education, in special educational needs. But I will say that not everything goes very smooth. As any kind of reform, it is not an easy one to help to make the teachers to understand the importance of this. And I will say that at the initial stage, when we use just EMIS to enter the data on children with disabilities and SEN, the information was entered by school teachers, and this created a mess, and we lost real-time data. They don't understand the necessity of, like, it's like overloading their work, everyday work, to enter also the data on children and their needs and their IEPs, etc., and the progress with IEPs. But then later in 2019, when we created this new module. Now the data are entered into the system by pedagogical psychological support centers, and this improved the data entry. So now we have real-time data. Children are assessed, their information is in the EMIS, and we see the picture. Whatever disaggregated data we need, it's almost there. Thank you.
Thanks so much for sharing all that with us. I can see how addressing such inaccuracies is a challenge and is very important. Director Anna, what have been Gambia's main challenges?
The Gambia's main challenges have to do with data definition and consistency challenges. We were, struggling on agreeing on standard definition. Example, what counts as disability categories, inclusion needs, vulnerability, etc., and ensuring consistent interpretation across schools and regions. Also, data quality and completeness issues. We were worried about the missing values, under-reporting, and uneven reporting quality, especially for sensitive inclusion-related indicators. Also, capacity and workflow constraints. There was limited time and skills at school and regional levels for accurate data capture, competing responsibilities, and weak feedback loops that reduce motivation to report well has been some of our major challenges in the Gambia.
Thanks. Yeah, there's always so many challenges. What about you in South Africa, Marie?
Well, Dan, I think firstly, conceptual confusion. As in Gambia, the Gambia and Armenia, making the identification of persons with disabilities more consistent and more in line with the social model of disability has been a challenge. In spite of us moving, having a very progressive policy way back 20 years ago, people have drifted back asking more what is wrong with the child rather than asking what are the barriers experienced, really capturing that in the data, capturing the support that's needed and where, and feeding that up into the national databases so that better planning can happen. So basically throughout our system, we've been realizing that you cannot fix the data without first fixing the whole conceptual model that underpins it, right from national to down to classroom level. And secondly, there's been a fragmentation across our systems. Education, health, and social development have been collecting different data, using different definitions with no interoperability. This means that early identification data rarely translates into education support, a child being tracked from birth until they enter education and then leave education for higher ed or further education. So the lesson is that integration must be designed deliberately. It cannot just be assumed. It is encouraging to hear that Armenia has made progress in this. And thirdly, I'd like to say that burdening schools without benefit remains a challenge. Teachers have been required to capture large amounts of data, even on a weekly basis, but they have rarely been able to see how this improves the support or the resourcing that they get in the classroom. So over time, this has turned data collection into a compliance exercise and created a negative attitude towards inclusive education broadly. So the lesson is simple but critical. If data does not come back to schools in the form of support, trust in the system collapses.
Yes, yeah, I've seen that many places. Director Anna, I know you have said that in the past, when data is collected, it's not always been used systematically, and that this undermines trust and reduces the motivation to take good data collection seriously. So now that you've made these improvements, how do you intend to actually use them?
First, with better planning and targeting, we want to use the improved disaggregated data to identify inequities, that is by learner characteristics and location, and also target support where needs are highest. We want to use resource allocation for inclusion so that we can inform decisions on deployment of teachers, learning support, assistive resources, infrastructure improvement, and inclusive planning materials. Routine monitoring through dashboard, also what we want to do, to use the DHIS tool-style dashboard or visualization to track inclusion-related indicators more frequently and respond fast rather than waiting for annual cycles only. We also want to have a stronger accountability and engagement by using the school report card and the community scorecard processes to triangulate administrative data with community or school experiences and improve responsiveness. Finally, we want policy and partner reporting produce clearer, more credible evidence on national policy and direction and SDG for related reporting, especially around equity and inclusion commitment.
And Marie, how about in South Africa? What's the intention of how to use your improved disability data?
Well, we are planning to shift how the system plans and funds and monitors. All the other speakers have spoken how critically data underpins this. So first, at the district and provincial level, because in South Africa we have concurrent functions between national and the provinces. So at those levels, we need functional data to allow planners to identify where support needs are concentrated, to allocate personnel and technology more equitable, especially in mainstream schools, and to move away from placement-based decision-making towards support that follows the learners. I regret that too many children in South Africa are still referred for special school placement rather than supporting them in the mainstream. Secondly, at the national level, improved EMIS data enables disability disaggregated reporting on access, progression, dropout, and the outcomes. Evidence-based reform of funding and post-provisioning norms, and proper monitoring of whether inclusive education is actually being realized in ordinary schools, not just promised in policy. So a modernized South African school administration and management system enables real-time dashboards and improved data validation, and there is a real potential to monitor inclusion more dynamically. But this will depend on ensuring that disability and support need fields are consistently captured and meaningfully used at school level. Finally, in the long term, the data reform should create the foundation for legal accountability. Once disability and support needs are visible in the system, exclusion, under-provision, and inequity are more easily identified. This is essential for aligning education systems with the CRPD Article 24 and especially the General Comment 4, which requires states to know where exclusion occurs in order to remedy it.
And Hasmi, how about in Armenia? How have you been using the improvements to your system?
Yes, as I said, this implementation of these changes facilitated the collection of comprehensive data on children with special educational needs and linked the results of SEN assessment to effectively organize individualized learning plans and to provide services for these students. Also informed funding of the schools and for this current system, the money follow child. And so this improved the funding of schools and also the education of these children and especially their outcome of education. This helps a lot to improve the data accuracy and because school funding creates also the national education funding and goes to national education budget. This improves the policy and better planning of the all inclusive education sector. But I want to say about challenges of using this data, because at the initial stage when we were planning this reform, we wanted to have strong interoperability between different ministries, between Ministry of Health, Education and Social Protection. So this data can be shared and improve not only the education, but also environmental changes for these children and their social protection as well. But however, I will say that at the moment, our EMIS system has interoperability only with population registry. It's past although the terminology, the approaches are the same with e-disability system, they can provide data to e-disability system, but they don't yet receive data back. At the initial stage, we were planning that EMIS will receive data from health sector, and then based on their assessment, they will assess the decodes like capacity, participation, and environment, and will pass this assessment to social protection sector, and then the children will just pass one-time assessment, and then the provisions will be provided. But at the moment, we don't have this strong interoperability, but we are working on this direction. Yet I will say that in order to make everything work as you plan, justified requirements for data exchange for IT systems should be embedded in legislation, and this will force the systems to work.
Thanks. Yeah, that interoperability is a challenge, and the fact that you've at least got it with between social welfare and EMIS does fill a particular hole in EMIS's, which is that they don't look at children who are out of school, right?
Yes,
So
I will. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry.
So what seems apparent to me from all three of you is that data reform must be embedded in system reform and not just upgrading the EMIS. And that these issues are not just technical, although there are technical issues, but they go to the heart of what we mean by disability with an inclusive lens.
It's my turn.
Yes,
Can
yes,
I say?
please.
Yeah. The main purpose, as we say, yes, improving education data collection has to be to ensure that this synchronized use of information by all relevant agencies is in place, and provide services to children with SEN and disabilities is well planned and shared between all agencies that work with these children. For this reason, IT systems must have interoperability and exchange of real-time data to enable timely and well-informed decision making. And the second priority is again this up-to-date data on children with SEN and disabilities to monitor their enrollment in education and track their progress. At the moment, we have, I will say that we have a good positive note that our data are used in social protection to track children who are out of school. And this is a huge progress that we can state that we have using the EMIS data, using the data from social protection and data from health sector. This allows the Ministry of Education and other agencies to track children who are at risk to being out of school, and also the children who are having conflict with law. So we are working on direction to improve the data and to have better data for informed decision making.
Well, thank you to all three of you. It's been fascinating to hear from all three of you. And I think what we see here is it's not only important that the information is of good quality, but it gets used systematically in every aspect of delivering quality education, developing policies and programs, implementing them, and finally monitoring and evaluating them. Somebody needs to tell me how much time we have for questions. It's probably not a lot. I saw one question in the comments coming through that I really want to talk to. And a couple people said, how can we collect this data without doctors? And I think this is what we mean by changing the conceptual idea of what we're talking about. We're not looking for an EMIS to say, oh, a child has cerebral palsy, a child has autism, a child has multiple sclerosis, and teachers can't do that, and it's not that useful for us. What we're looking for is what teachers can do is identify children who have difficulties doing things. They have difficulties walking. They have difficulties staying on task. They have difficulties hearing or seeing. etc. And teachers can identify, or the best place to identify those things. And we could talk more about the child function module teacher version. But Sylvia or Esther or whoever, tell me how many minutes we have to answer a few questions.
Merci beaucoup, Dan. Les échanges sur la base des questions des participants
Dan.
sont très importants pour nous.
This Q&A session is extremely important. We're going to have about 15 minutes. There are so many questions here, and I'm really going to give the panelists the opportunity, and Daniel Mont as well, to answer these questions. So we're going to keep in touch. The community of practices will actually offer the possibility to answer these questions in greater detail at a later stage. We will analyze all the questions and come back to you. The resources are available on the My Page IIEP after this global webinar. And as you know, the community of practice is also an ideal space to further our discussions, go deeper, and learn from one and other. Dan, you've got the floor.
Yes, my problem is, since I don't speak Portuguese or French, and the questions come through the chat, if maybe somebody could direct me. There was the one I mentioned before about how we don't want to have we don't need doctors in order to identify children who are at risk of exclusion, right? We don't need doctors who identify children who might need support and the kind of support they need. You know, do they need support in physical limitations, or do they need support in various aspects of learning or behavior management, or whatever? If somebody can maybe direct me to a question that came up, since a lot of them have come up in French.
Yeah, I can read it out for you, Dan.
Thank you.
The question is, in South Africa, do children benefit from free access to certain resources? What about in the Gambia? And how does disability inclusive EMIS help with this?
So
do children benefit?
Anna Marie, can you come in?
Yes, in South Africa, we've got a huge system. We've got 14 million children in the whole schooling system. So we have a kind of poor funding to achieve equity in the South African school system. So we have the majority of schools are no fee schools, and the state does provide resources. We've made a lot of progress, for instance, in providing teaching and learning materials in an accessible format such as Braille for all 14, or for up to grade 9 to the end of formal education. But what we're currently having a problem with is that a large chunk of our money still goes to special schools for segregated placement. And our biggest challenge now is to redirect funding to have more available in the mainstream. And I think that's a challenge that many countries struggle with, especially a country where there's been a very strong special segregated school system. So we would like to see this data to inform more real-time availability of money and funding, and especially assistive technology and materials in accessible format in the mainstream. I think that's one of the big challenges that we're grappling with.
Director Anna?
In the Gambia, government supports students. Majority of our children with disabilities are in mainstream schools. So the government supports first through the training of polyvalent itinerant teachers who go around the school to support these children. They also provide resources that they need, such as Braille. And recently we have a synchronized Gambian Sign Language, and they support students to be able to access those sign languages and differentiated curriculum. So government does produce, and we use the EMIS data to help in identifying where the children are. That is why we really work towards having a more accurate EMIS data to be able to ensure that we support all the children that need support. Thank you.
Julia McGowan asked an interesting question about whether she wants to know if you've encountered pushback from ministries of finance, for example, in moving to a functional assessment because they believe that that might identify a lot more students and lead to a much more budget. She said that's something that she's encountered. So I'm wondering if any of the three of you have gotten that kind of pushback. Oh, you're going to start identifying too many children and it's going to cost us too much money. Is that something you've come across? Any of you?
In South
Can I?
Africa, sorry, let me not. I just wanted to say our national census uses the functional assessment. So the challenge has been in education is to align education to the national census and the general household surveys. So I don't think in South Africa is very rights orientated, and I think it's just been more of a technical challenge to align all our systems more effectively. I don't think it was a pushback to identify too many children.
Can I say?
Yes, Hasmi, please.
I would say that yes, this concern was also true for Armenia, but thanks to UNICEF and the research that they have done, they prove that keeping special schools is very much costly than just having children in mainstream schools. So we, thanks to this advocacy and to the reform that we have, this general inclusive education reform in the country, we now reduce the number of special schools from 25 to only 6 that now exist, and those are all the rest of the schools became pedagogical psychological support centers. Children are moved from these schools to mainstream school, and the funding to these special schools goes to mainstream school. So this was not a huge big deal, but now the system became more transparent. We know where these children are, how they learn, what they learn, and the environmental issues that are like funding of environmental adjustments at schools is very specific. So what type of adjustments the school is needed, the funding goes there. So it's very much like it's not it is not cheap, but it is not as costly as special schooling. So I would say.
In the Gambia, honestly, resources have been a very huge challenge coming from government, especially. But like as alluded to by the other speakers, we are fortunate to have support from other stakeholders that really help us to get support we need. But honestly, government support has been really, really
limited. Somebody else asks, what kind of training and support do you provide to teachers or other school personnel in collecting the data? And can you give examples of decisions or policies that were informed by disability inclusive education?
In the Gambia, we have polyvalent identities that support in collecting data, but we have focal points in each of the schools within the Gambia that are trained on using the screening tool that was developed to help teachers to be able to identify those students. So those focal persons are provided with training so that they can bring in more accurate data, because that has been a challenge. So we, with funding from World Bank, we were able to get someone that helped us develop a screening tool that caters into consideration the Washington set of questions. And those are the ones that teachers, those focal persons are trained to be able to provide that information to be infused into the EMIS data.
I want to also say that I was involved in the testing of the child functioning module teacher version in Belize, and it was also tested in Malawi, a couple places. And basically, the idea was looking at the child functioning module that's recommended for use in surveys to identify children with disabilities in the population. Can we modify that a little bit so it's geared towards teachers? And can teachers identify the children in a way that we think is accurate? And the testing came back very positive. The teachers identification of difficulties in functioning aligned very closely with the parents' identification. There was one exception, though, and that was in the learning area, where teachers identified more children with learning difficulties than the parents did, which makes sense because in a school environment, some of those learning difficulties might become more apparent. But we have evidence, we have documented evidence that that teachers can reliably identify children who have functional activities that put them at risk of exclusion. I don't know if anybody else wants to come in and talk about answer that question as well.
Then I will say from Armenia side, as I said, our special schools were transformed into pedagogical psychological support centers, and those centers help the teachers with providing this better education to children who need special attention. And they conduct a lot of training for teaching personnel. They conduct a lot of training seminars for parents, for other students, to make them understand different types of disabilities, different types of special educational needs, the purpose of adjusted environment for the better performance of these children, and this change in mind of accepting disability not as the issue, but as a advantage, maybe also for making the society more inclusive. And I will say that this having the model that we have in Armenia, I will say it's a good one, that we have a regional pedagogical psychological support center that coordinates the work of 20 regional pedagogical psychological support centers. They produce methodological guides to the training of their staff, and their staff is training teachers, and then the issue comes back to national level and goes back to regional level. And also keeping this EMIS as tracking factor of understanding where the children are, with what type of types are prevailing here or there, and what type of support intensity is needed. Everything is documented and very valuable information for schools and for the education system in general to plan appropriately. And I would say this is working, if the system is working well.
Great, nice to hear. Another question is there a template with suggested fields that need to be included in the EMIS to reflect disability data? When it comes to the identification of children with disabilities, the answer is yes. The child functioning module teacher version is a great place, at least to start, if nothing else. In terms of the environment, I think there are examples. There's some old EMIS guidance from UNICEF. I know they're updating it. There are countries, Fiji and other countries, that have been asking environmental questions. So there's many examples from countries that have maybe a couple questions to more extensive questions. And that's part of this idea of this community of practice, is to share our experiences and what data are we collecting, and to try to build that together, and to adjust it to the local context, right? In one context, asking about the availability of screen readers on a computer is very important. In another context where there's no computers, it doesn't make sense to be asking that, right? So the template has to be geared towards the environments in which you're working in, but the various categories of information and how to start thinking about capturing the inclusivity of the various factors that exist in the school system. I think there are many examples that we can go to that you can go to draw upon them.
Dan, if I can say something, what has worked for South Africa a lot in terms of this contextualization and understanding of what children's needs are. We have made a lot of progress with our policy on screening, identification, assessment, and support, which actually counts on teachers understanding the barriers that children experience best. So we have made good progress in the country to establish nearly 70% of schools have a school-based support team. And this is a kind of a problem-solving team that continuously start looking at the barriers that are systemic at the school, including things like attitudes, family challenges, and a whole range of issues other than just learning difficulties and so on, and coming up with joint planning on how they can start addressing, developing, individual support plans, attract learners, engage with parents, link up with other resources in the community. So I think it is really important. I'm so glad to see Mel Ainscough was on the call. He always said that you've got to give power to a school to take ownership for inclusion. And to do their own development of the capacity to include all children. Thanks.
Yeah. Interesting. In the Fiji EMIS, the way they try to take the data and use it at that school level is, after the EMIS data is collected and a child is identified as being at risk, the EMIS also collects data on what kind of supports does the child need, who should he or she be referred to, and what kind of supports exist in the school, and what's the gap. And then so the school can say, oh, we have X number of children who need this kind of support. This is how many are not receiving it in this school. And so they can then budget what would it cost to meet that need. And they also have a parent-teacher conference. So once the child is identified as having those needs, the parent comes in, talks with the teacher, goes through the EMIS form together so they can get more of an agreement, sort of more of a collaborative evaluation, basically, of where the child is having those difficulties. And so they can use it at the school level to plan how they're going to address the child's need at the school level. But then they can aggregate that data up at the system level for the Ministry of Education to see what are the extent of unmet needs and where are they, and so what would it cost to actually meet them. And so that's the approach that they take, which leads me to the next question I see on the which was successful inclusive planning requires substantial involvement from local institutions. So how can financing for planned activities in the field be facilitated? Always comes back to financing. So I don't know if any of you want to comment on that.
I will say then that financing, yes, for small countries, it's an issue, but there is always funding that is spent not properly. And it is a matter to find this funding and bring to the right place. As I said that, for example, this long net of special schools that we were having with a lot of students who have seen or just appear there because of poverty, etc., were just placed into this segregated education system. Now it is closed. It's a history. We don't have these special schools, and all children are in mainstream school. And so this whole funding goes to mainstream school and supports the children, their inclusion in the education system. And one thing just I want to say that school teachers do not assess disability. They just assess special educational needs. Disability assessment is for social protection sector. It's a different system, and they assess it differently. Here we just look at special educational needs and adjust the environment, the tools, the methodology, the pedagogy, everything to the needs of a child, and develop the individual education plan and track the implementation of this individual education plan. This is the role of the school. Focus on education, not on disability.
Thank you. So we're running out of time. I know we could probably talk forever. Let me just say, we'll close with one thing that, one of the principles of the CRPD is progressive realization. We're not going to make our schools, all our systems completely inclusive this year, even next year, even the next 5 years. But what we can do is start taking the appropriate actions to build the systems, to get the data, to get the frameworks that we need to move in the right direction as fast as we can, given our knowledge and our level of resources. And hopefully this community of practice can be something which greases the wheels for some of you in doing that. So I'd like to thank Anna Marie Hasmik for sharing all your experience with us. And I look forward to interacting with all of you as we move forward in this endeavor. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup à Daniel Montt. Merci également à nos trois
Thank
panélistes.
you very much, Daniel Montt. Thank you to our three panelists, and thank you to all the participants who made these exchanges very fruitful. We are conscious of the fact that we have very interesting questions which have been shared here. But as I said earlier on, we're not going to answer now, but we'll just use them in the community of practice. And all the resources connected to this webinar will be made available on my platform, my IAP platform, but there are other resources which you will be able to find within the community of practice, our COPTES, and we will invite you to become a member of this community if you're not already a member. Thank you very much to all of you. And I would like to remind you and to highlight the fact that the Director Mendy is the focal point for Gambia for the regional program planning for inclusive education funded by AICS. So we are just highlighting the experience of countries targeted in the program, but at the same time, scale it up to other continents, to other countries to learn from their experience. And the exchanges in the chat box have shown that you're interested and you would like to know more about that. You would like to have the tools, the resources, which shows that how relevant this COPTES is, which we intended to share with you. We are going to very quickly present that. We don't have much time, but it is important to give you an idea of this community of practice, our platform, and also the added value. So this was mentioned by our IIEP director. The community of practices are tools, very powerful tools and instruments which are recognized within the IIEP as drivers for change. So we do not consider them as discussion forums, but as real drivers for change. Our COPTES is available in 3 languages, in English, French, and Portuguese. And this is very important in terms of accessibility, which is a very important criteria for us. We have just opened up 2 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, we decided that you can now become members of this COP, and there we have 123 members from Africa, Asia, Latin America, from 48 countries. That was the case 48 minutes ago, but we're sure things have already changed, and we see that there are many people interested to become members of this COPTES. Who can become a member? Well, first of all, decision makers, policy decision makers, and government people, and all those involved in the analysis of education planning, but also members of organizations dealing with people with disabilities. We were happy to see that there were some people, some of them connected to this webinar today, as well as members of the civil society who can also become members, those who are interested in promoting inclusive education, as well as development partners. We had this, we could see in the questions asked in the chat box that we had several people, and of course in national and international NGOs working on the field to promote inclusive education, and also very important researchers. Researchers have a major role to play for the community of practice. And one of the questions raised in the chat box during the panel discussions was, what are the thematics that researchers on which researchers should work into more details to contribute to the topic we have developed today. That's very important. And we have some researchers who are members of COP, our community of practice, but we also have practitioners from the private sector working in the field, people working with young people with disabilities who want to contribute to our community of practice. How can our COPTES support your country in your different countries with different contexts and with different challenges? First of all, have access to knowledge, documentation made available, best practices for tools, and it is an area where you can also ask questions, exchange with your peers, and also exchange with and discuss with peers and share best practices and stories about your own countries. And as we have done it today, you have panelists, they have shared with us their best practices, and they have also shown and highlighted points that need to be improved, the challenges, etc. So that's important because it shows that the community of practice is an opportunity to develop and improve all that. And I propose now that we discover together this COP-DIES platform. Can you confirm that you see my screen with the COP-DIES, the presentation on COP-DIES? Can you all see it? Yes, we can see your screen, Sylvia. So give me a second then. Normally it should start now. Yes, that's okay. Great, thank you very much. So welcome to this platform, Community of Practice platform on the planning of education for the inclusion of people with disabilities, COP-DIES. Disability Inclusive Education Sector Planning. So as you can see, we have 3 languages. This is an accessibility criteria, which is very important. All the content will be in 3 languages, French, English, and Portuguese. It's a very intuitive interface, as you can see, which encourages participation and promotes the participation, encourages members to participate. So you can see that it focuses on 3 blocks. In the first one, we see the area dedicated to the members. We can see that together. This allows you to see all the members of this community of practice, and it also allows us to connect and send them a private message without that being visible for the whole platform. And visible to the whole platform. You can also select by country and see how many members come from the same countries. We have an area dedicated to videos. We have several welcome videos showing the added value of this COP, and the what is important are the regional points funded by AICS, and showing that what they wanted to add to this community of practice and what they want to learn from other countries. We also have a welcome message from the IIEP UNESCO team in Africa. And here you have the direct exchanges and discussions, which is very important in our COP-DIES platform. This is the forum where to which the members can contribute in their own language, the language they choose. We have the first forum with the presentation, and you can see here all the members of the COP who have shared not only their profile, but also their motivations, and have explained what they're interested in, what they want to share with the other members of the community of practice, and what they want to learn. So you can, as you can see, you can use your own language. Mrs. Constantina here has written in Portuguese, but it can be translated immediately in the languages available so as to answer her to her comment, send an answer to her comment. And you can also, as I said, share your comments in the language you choose. So we have already a lot of contributions. It's a thematic forum connected to the planning related to the inclusion of people with disabilities. There are discussions and interactions amongst the members. We have already a lot of things, and it grows as we go. Last night we have launched the first forum. Why is it important to include disability in the education system? So we have just launched this seminar. We have no comments yet, but that will come immediately after this global webinar dedicated to a more inclusive EMIS stated. We will probably have a lot of comments and contributions. And let us just look at the column to the right. So there is a section, a shared library made available to all the members with quite a lot of documents and resources, which the members can add to by adding documents. So as you can see, it's a very dynamic area, highly participatory, which allows all the members not only to learn, but also to share and there are the good best practices and the successes of the different countries. So here you can see different buttons, different keys you can use to to participate and in a discussion. And you can see that the focus is really on the members and the discussions amongst the members. On this platform, you also have all the information related to the events we will be organizing for this community of practice. And this is very important because the community of practice is not limited to the platform which is hosted by the My IAP platform, UNESCO's My IAP platform, which hosts other platforms and other community of practices. And the director, Martin Benavides, mentioned that. And it is very important to say that our COP is a part of a global process to highlight knowledge, competences, skills, and the ideas to create a network between all the different players promoting education. And for us, we focus on the planning of the education sector to include people with disabilities. And we encourage you to just become a member if you're not already a member. And in this section, you will see all the events which will be organized in the framework of this COP10. The next global webinar will take place on April the 23rd with the single whom you know. And before that, you will have some surprises, and it will be up to Esther Camara, our community manager, to introduce that. Esther, over to you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Yes, I'll share my screen to talk about the other exciting things that we have within the COP platform. So as my colleague Sylvia has mentioned, the community of practice is this space that we have designed to ensure that there is knowledge co-creation and knowledge sharing. And one of the activities that we are creating and going to facilitate in order to push this agenda even further is something we're calling learning labs. So what are learning labs? Learning labs are in-depth interactive sessions where COP members come together to share implementation experiences. And as they do this, they reflect on what works and what doesn't. So practical experiences on what works and what doesn't, strengths and weaknesses during the implementation processes. But as they come together, they'll also generate tools and guidance on how to move forward and push this agenda of disability inclusive education sector planning. And why? Why do we do this? Why do we create this separate space or separate platform to promote in-depth discussions? It's because we recognize that when we have this large global webinars such as this, sometimes it's difficult to get all the questions answered or to have direct communication and interaction with people, with experts who you want to interact with. And so we've created this space to ensure that we push beyond the discussions that we have during global webinars and go in depth in them in order to promote system reform thinking. We also aim to create technical outputs. And what do I mean by this? I mean that as we have seen in the chats, we've seen people asking for different resources. Do we have the link to this? Do we have something explaining this? Do we have a document that's showing the different types of disabilities? And in this space is where we can create these outputs together. As Sylvia shared, we are encouraging South-to-South collaboration, collaboration between different ministries of education across different countries. And here we believe we can create outputs that would benefit people across the globe working on this issue. And last but not least, why we do this, as I've mentioned, is to promote collaboration. We know that as we work together, we create systems together, we're stronger together. And this is what we will do within the learning labs. When will we have these learning labs? After each webinar, such as this, we're going to organize 3 learning labs, 1 in each language: French, English, and Portuguese. And these learning labs, for example, the ones that will soon follow this one, will be on the theme disability inclusive education management information systems, what we have talked about today. But then we will choose specific topics to go in depth What about an EMIS system? We want to discuss what kind of questions that we have that are more direct and more specific so that we can make progress towards ensuring we can implement this disability inclusive education EMIS. The first learning lab will be on the 5th of March and it will be in Portuguese at 2 p.m. GMT. Generally, we'll have these learning labs on Thursdays, so that's something that you can keep in mind, but we'll be in constant communication with you on how to participate within these learning labs and the dates in which they will occur. Just to share with you what the structure of a learning lab will look like, we'll begin by framing the topic. So as I said, the ones following will be on EMIS, but what specifically within EMIS? Is it about the teachers? Is it about the children and identification? So we'll begin by framing a specific topic within disability inclusive EMIS, and then we'll open the space for collective reflection. Very similar to the question and answer session that we had, but hopefully more in-depth and more interactive, where you'll be allowed to open your mic and speak to your fellow colleagues. And last but not least, we aim to have practical takeaways. So we do not want this space to be a space that we simply come in and discuss, but we want to have actual outputs, sometimes in the form of perhaps policy briefs or guidance that we can share with our colleagues across different countries or across different ministries. And who will be in this learning lab? So to participate in the learning lab, you'd have to be a member of the COP. So we highly encourage you to join and become a member of this community of practice. But within that space, there will be a facilitator who will share and who will guide the discussions and will be ongoing. And there will be presenters or a panelist that will talk through the very specific topic that we've come up with. We will be inviting COP members to come forward as experts, because we know that all of you are experts within your country spaces and that you have something to share. So we'll be inviting you to come and share within the Learning Lab. Now, lastly, I'd like to invite you now to participate in this participatory action of shaping the learning labs together. And I'll invite you to open this Mentimeter, either using the link in the chat or this QR code, so that we can design together, what kind of topics do we want to address in the coming weeks in these learning labs. So I'll give you a moment.
We can give you the QR code, and you also will have the possibility in the chat to connect to the survey. We're going to give you 1 minute because we are basically running late, but we're still happy to have you with us because your opinion does count. This is a community of practice that basically showcases the needs of its members and their wishes. So, Essel, you've got the floor.
Thank you. We're waiting to see the results of the. Go ahead and share the results. Thank you. Amazing, great to see you all responding and interacting. Identification of children.
We're going to give 20 seconds more before ending the survey, and then we shall move to the closing ceremony of this global webinar.
Definitely take your input into consideration as we design the learning labs. Amazing, thank you very much. And I hope to see you within the Community of Practice platform and in participating within this learning lab sessions in the coming weeks. Thank you. Over to you, Sylvia.
Thank you, Esther. So we are here in great numbers, and we shall be so in the next webinars, both global webinars and the learning labs. So these language labs are only reserved for members of the COP. So I'd like to give the floor to Madam Teresa Fernandez, who is the head of office in IIP Africa. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for giving me the floor. I would like to close this. We have had a great session. We're running late, but I won't take a lot of time. Director of IP, Mr. Martin Benavides, Director of AICS office in Dakar, Giovanni Grondin, dear partners, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. As we conclude this first global webinar on the community of practice on education sector planning, for the inclusion of persons with disabilities, COPDS, I would like to thank you for your participation. Your presence here today is a clear demonstration of your commitment to our shared mission to promote quality, inclusive and equitable education for all. I hope you enjoyed the presentations of our panelists and the rich discussion that followed. I would like to warmly thank each and every panelist for your contributions and each and every one of you who enriched our collective reflection. I hope that this webinar has inspired you to continue the dialogue within our community of practice. We are convinced that the COP-DS is a real lever for transformation. We therefore invite you to join us, if you've not already done so, to become actively involved and to share your ideas, resources, and experiences. I would also like to express deep gratitude to the Italian Corporation through the AICS agency, which funds our regional program, Planning for Inclusive Education, and made the creation of this community of practice possible by supporting the IEP in its commitment to placing the inclusion of persons with disability at the heart of the educational planning. AICS is helping to strengthen a more inclusive, equitable, and truly transformative education systems. In conclusion, I would like to thank the interpreters, our colleagues, and the entire technical team, and everyone who's contributed to the success of this webinar. To conclude, I would like you to make COP-DS a driver of change and a catalyst for progress in inclusive education in Africa and beyond. I'm going to say something in Portuguese.
I would like to warmly thank each and every one of you who have contributed to the variety of exchanges. This is only the beginning. We invite you, therefore, to actively participate, to share your idea, resources, and experiences.